close enough.
Now, Okamoto, one of our senior youth and a choir member, will light our chalice this morning during opening words. It's not lit? Oh. Sometimes the fire goes out and you relight it. These opening words come from Carrie Holly Hurt. Love holds you. Love bears witness to all your inherent dignity and worthiness. It witnesses how you try, succeed, and fail, and it does not flinch. Love will not let go. Love holds all of you. Our opening hymn this morning is one that is a bit unfamiliar to me and probably to you, but luckily we have our choir here to help us out. I think we'll do just fine. It's All My Memories of Love, number 336. Please rise in body or in spirit and join in singing or in your hearts on Zoom to All My Memories of Love.
Welcome to First Parish in Bedford, a Unitarian Universalist congregation where people have been gathering for almost 300 years to further the spirit of liberal religion, to bring more love and justice into the world. Whoever you are, whomever you love, whether you worship one God, many gods, or no God, you are welcome here. We have some announcements this morning. The haunted house is coming soon, and the haunted house needs you. So sign up to volunteer during coffee hour. There are still a few slots left to be photographed for our new photo directory that is coming soon. They're going fast. You can easily make your appointment to be photographed by going to the church website and clicking the link. There's an important community forum on Thursday, September 28th. On the climate impact of private jet expansion. This is in person at the Bedford Town Hall. It's also on Zoom. And an email with more information is going to be sent out later this week, so look for that. But in the meantime, save the date in your mind, Thursday, September 28th. Rally is also being planned at the State House on Monday, October 2nd from 11 to 1. You can get more information on these at the Environmental Justice Committee table that will be out in the common during community hour. I'm sure they would love to talk to you. The exhibit of contemporary art, which has been brought directly from renowned artists in Ukraine to First Parish, is here now. It is upstairs in the gallery. Admission is free and open to the public, so please check it out. And you can join us today after the service at 11:30 for a brief gallery talk with the exhibit's curators in the Bacon Room. That's 11:30 after the service. And finally, a reminder, you can join Reverend Annie, Lisa Maria, the board, and the Faith Development Committee here in the sanctuary after the service today for a salon on faith development for children pre-K through 8th grade. Children are also invited to participate. There will be programming for them. The board will be serving soup in the commons before the salon, so you won't be too hungry. Kicks off at 11:30. That is it for all of the announcements. So now I invite you to rise again in body or spirit and join in saying our unison affirmation that we say every Sunday. The words are in your bulletin. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. El amor es el espíritu de esta iglesia, y el servicio es su ley. Este es nuestro gran pacto, vivir juntos en paz, buscar la verdad en espíritu de amor y ayudarnos los unos a los otros. Please be seated.
Good morning. Good morning. So last year, you might remember, I had a furniture theme for a few Sundays. I decided to go with birds for a little while. Y'all liked the birds last week, so we have some more birds. Apparently, I'm on a bird kick this fall. So, the story we have today is from the Burmese tradition. There are 1,062 different kinds of birds that make their home in the jungles, wetlands, and along the coast of Burma. And once upon a time, those 1,062 kinds of birds did not get along. They were always making a terrible ruckus. Why do you flap your wings so fast? Your feathers are too red. You know, with that technique, you're not going to be able to catch a worm. Often the birds got so carried away that they said, "I'm a better bird than you are." The reply was always, "No, I'm a better bird than you." There was no friendship amongst the birds, and not much fun either. Finally, Pheasant grew weary. He didn't want to quarrel. So when Crow came along, ready to pick an argument, as you know Crow likes to, Pheasant said, "Crow, you're a better bird than me." Crow was surprised. Those words warmed his heart, and he replied politely, "No, Pheasant, you are a better bird than me." Pheasant's heart felt warm. The two struck up a conversation. They got to know one another. They found out that they got along very well. And before long, they decided to live side by side, and the two birds enjoyed one another's company very much. Now their conversations were completely different than when they had been in the days of being argumentative. One day, when Pheasant was standing stock still, Crow noticed and said, "That was a good way to avoid being seen by enemies." Another time, when Crow was building a nest, Pheasant said, "Those sticks would make a good, strong nest. But have you thought about a way to make it, a little softer inside?" Crow looked at the nest and then at his chest, and he began to add some of the downy feathers that he had. Talking and getting along like that made it easy to learn from each other and be together. The two friends' affection for one another was obvious. The other birds were surprised. How could Pheasant and Crow spend so much time together without arguing? And so some decided to test their friendship. "Pheasant, why do you spend so much time with that good-for-nothing Crow?" "Oh, you mustn't say that," replied Pheasant. "Crow is a better bird than I, and he honors me by living with me." The next day they went to Crow. "Crow, why do you spend so much time with that good-for-nothing Pheasant?" "Oh, you mustn't say that," replied Crow. "Pheasant is a better bird than I, and he honors me by living with me." The birds were deeply impressed by Crow and Pheasant's attitude to one another. They began to wonder, why do we always fight and quarrel? They watched how crow and pheasant treated one another, and they soon learned that it wasn't so difficult to be kind. They also learned that when they practiced compassion, the way crow and pheasant did, life was far more enjoyable. And that is how friendship and respect developed among the 1,062 birds of Burma. I now invite our children and youth, pre-K through 7th grade, to come to Faith Development along with their teachers, and any 8th graders are also welcome. We will find the right spot for you this morning, depending on what your vibe is. Thank you.
Good morning. At this time in the service, we'd like to invite those of you who would like to light a candle to please join us at the candle stand. We also will be asking around on Zoom and checking the chat afterwards in case a joy or concern turns up there. And I will remain at the candle stand at the end of the service in case someone wants to light a candle in private. Please give your name, and if possible, keep your comments brief, and we'll get started. Okay, I will light one final candle for the joys and concerns we are holding in our heart, and we will be checking the chat in case someone wants to mention something there. And I will be at the candle stand at the end of the service in case any of you want to light a candle in private.
This is indeed a congregation where we hold each other in love through all that life brings us, where we try our best to be more like pheasant and less like the snippy birds, and where, as you can tell from the announcements, we have a lot going on, which is wonderful. So I hope that you will give generously to this morning's offering to sustain the many programs of this congregation and to sustain this loving community. Thank you so much for your generosity.
Our responsive reading today is by the Reverend Rob Eller Isaacs. Reverend Eller Isaacs was co-minister with his wife Jan of Unity Church Unitarian in St. Paul, Minnesota for 22 years until he passed away at age 70 from cancer last year. He was a giant in the UU ministry and was known, among other things, for introducing more spiritually engaging elements into UU worship services. And he believed that our ability to work for justice, that our ability to put love into action, was fundamentally connected with our spiritual development. And so he encouraged people to develop regular spiritual practices. One of those was a practice of self-reflection, atonement, and forgiveness. In the Jewish tradition, this is also a time of self-reflection and seeking forgiveness. Yom Kippur begins this evening, Sunday, September 24th, and ends Monday night. This is considered the holiest of days in the Jewish calendar, ending the period that began with Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, and the time known as the 10 Days of Awe. Yom Kippur, also known as the Day of Atonement, is a day set aside for fasting, prayer, and reflection. It's a day for deep connection to the self and to the divine, in which one acknowledges wrongs one has done and asks for forgiveness. In the Unitarian Universalist tradition, practices of self-reflection and forgiveness are rooted in humility, in gratitude, and in community. We know as humans we necessarily confront life's challenges as imperfect beings. And so we are grateful for the gifts of compassion and kindness and community that allow us to be there for one another in those moments when we shine and those moments when we fall short. And in recognition of our capacity to do good and to do harm, and in recognition that we are interdependent, that we need one another. And so it matters how we show up in community. In recognition of all of these things, we embrace accountability, and with it, the practice of offering and seeking forgiveness. And so I invite you to join me in this practice today with Rob Eller Isaacs' Litany of Atonement. It's number 637 in your gray or your cloth-bound hymnal, but if you don't have a hymnal, that's okay. After each line, the response is, we forgive ourselves and each other, we begin again in love. So I will read a line. Your response is, we forgive ourselves and each other, we begin again in love. It's 637. For remaining silent when a single voice would have made a difference, we forgive ourselves and each other, we begin again in love. For each time that our fears have made us rigid and inaccessible, we forgive ourselves and each other, we begin again in love. For each time that we have struck out in anger without just cause, we forgive ourselves and each other, we begin again in love. For each time our greed has blinded us to the needs of others, we forgive ourselves and each other, we begin again in love. For the selfishness that sets us apart and alone, we forgive ourselves and each other, we begin again in love. For falling short of the admonitions of the Spirit, we forgive ourselves and each other, we begin again in love. For losing sight of our unity, we forgive ourselves and each other, we begin again in love. For these and for so many acts, both evident and subtle, which have fueled the illusion of separateness, we forgive ourselves and each other, we begin again in love. Amen. Our hymn is number 18 in our gray or cloth-bound hymnal. It's What Wondrous Love Is This? Notice it appears on both the left and the right side. We are singing the left side, so ignore the right side, please. Number 18, please rise in body or spirit.
Last week, I saw a meme on Facebook, and it said, "Every good song answers a question. Like, how do you spell respect? What were these boots made for? Are the boys away from town? Does this impress you much? Which girl is on fire?" Well, instead, I'm going to try to do a different thing. I'm going to try to answer a song's question with a sermon. What wondrous love is this? Now, there are a lot of songs that ask questions about love, such as, what is love? Baby, don't hurt me. And what's love got to do with it? Well, I can tell you that love has a lot to do with it if the it that we're talking about is instead being Unitarian Universalist at First Parish in Bedford. We say every Sunday that love is the spirit of this church, and as Jamie talked about last Sunday, the new draft that's being proposed for our bylaws to describe the values of our faith puts love at the center. But I have heard some people in our congregation ask about that love at the center, saying, what does that mean? That's so vague. So what wondrous love is this? Well, to answer that question, I have to make a confession, and I hope you can still respect me after I tell you that I do not like pets. I know that many of you do like pets, and I am glad for you, and I celebrate that for you, and we can be different from each other in this community, but me, I don't like pets. I like people. However, I live with a pet, a dog. His name is Atlas. He's a mutt with a lot of lab in him. I call him sometimes my step-dog-in-law because here's how Atlas came to live with me. A long time ago, before Moira was born, my daughter was born, I moved in with my housemate Elizabeth, who I've lived with for now 9 years. And we were two couples at that time, but the couple separated and new people were incorporated into our home. And in 2021, Elizabeth's new partner, Oscar, moved in. And Oscar's dog is named Atlas, and Atlas moved in too. So he's my stepdog-in-law. The thing is, I don't like Atlas. He barks when new people come into the house in a very hostile manner that makes it hard to be welcoming. He barks when people don't come in the house and they're just near the house. He chews on the furniture and is just kind of a pain. But the other thing is, I love Atlas. And when I say I love Atlas, I don't mean I feel fondly toward Atlas. What I mean is I take care of Atlas. When his water dish is empty, I fill it up. When he needs to go outside, I let him out. When I'm going somewhere that I know he loves to go, like near the dog park or to the fells, even if it's sort of inconvenient and annoying, I take him along. And I think that that is the kind of love that is at the center of our faith. The kind of love I have for my stepdog-in-law. Because the kind of love at the center of our faith is not a personal love. It's not like the love I have for my daughter Moira, a fiercely protective, whole heart love. It's not like the love I have for my parents, full of gratitude and tenderness, even in moments of frustration or disconnection. It's not like the love I have for my platonic life partner and best friend, Sarah, who I've known since elementary school, who's been with me through every stage of life. Now, we need that kind of love. I'm not dissing that kind of love. That kind of love is so crucial. It sustains us. It is a manifestation of that love that is in the center, but it is not itself the love that is in the center. Because the love at the center of our faith is a big love that's for everybody. It's not specific to those we feel fondly toward. In fact, that love in the center isn't about how we feel at all, it's about what choices we make. It's a practice, as it says in our thought to ponder, which has a small typo, which is my fault, not Stacy's. It should say, I am often struck by the dangerous narcissism fostered by spiritual rhetoric that pays so much attention to individual self-improvement and so little to the practice of love within the context of community. The practice of love in the context of community. Carter Hayward is an Episcopal priest, a feminist and queer theologian, someone who blazed trails for women and queer people in ministry, and one of my favorite theologians that we read in seminary. And she has this to say about choosing love. We are not automatic lovers of self, others, world, or God. Love is a choice. Not simply or even necessarily a rational choice, but rather a willingness to participate with others in the healing of a broken world and broken lives. Love is the choice to experience life as a member of a human family, a partner in the dance of life, rather than as an alien in the world or a deity above the world, aloof and apart from human flesh. In other words, love is about choosing to be in the mess of it all, in the fullness of life, choosing not to distance ourselves. The gorgeous anthem that our choir sang for our offering, Still, Still with Thee, comes from a poem written by Harriet Beecher Stowe, famous for writing Uncle Tom's Cabin in 1852. Stowe and her husband were outspoken critics of slavery, and they also helped to keep those who were fleeing slavery safe as part of the Underground Railroad. Her original subtitle for Uncle Tom's Cabin was The Man That Was a Thing. And though the subtitle was later changed to Life Among the Lowly, the first choice is provocative. It points right to the heart of the matter. People are not things. And yet the system of anti-black chattel slavery that had existed for so long on this continent had convinced many people in our society to act as if black people were objects. Stowe, like other abolitionists, was making a choice. It would have been very easy as a white woman to distance herself. She could have opted out, but she chose connection. She chose love. And to choose love that everybody love is really powerful. And it's also really overwhelming. Because there's a lot of people in this world, and then there's also a lot of other beings, like dogs, to love. I've learned a little bit about how to navigate this dynamic through my work with the Boston Immigration Justice Accompaniment Network that many of you have heard me talk about quite a bit. In that network, we have 4 values that guide our work, and the last one is we fight for one another like family because we are. And we try to live into that, but we've had to clarify what exactly we mean about that. We've clarified that we don't mean fight for every single person in immigration jail as if they're your child or your sibling or your parent, because that's too intense. It's just not possible. Our bodies are not made for that. Love is infinite, but we are finite creatures. So we suggest to think of it more like everyone is your great uncle or your cousin that you don't see that often but you care about. Again, it's not about the really personal, specific love, but it's about keeping that circle of care big enough to encompass everyone. still, we have to determine where to direct our resources, our time, our energy, our attention. And so here's some questions that I've been using when I'm grappling with where to direct that big love. The first question I ask is, where can love disrupt a toxic pattern? And we heard a wonderful story about that this morning. Pheasant was like, what is up with these birds? These birds are treating everyone terribly. This is no fun. And he chose to disrupt that pattern by being kind and complimentary to Crow. And pretty soon they were friends, and pretty soon everybody was friends. They disrupted the harm that was happening by choosing love. And we heard another story about that last Sunday in Jamie's sermon. If you were there, you might remember he talked about Sarah Silverman, the comedian, responding to an internet troll who was being mean to her by being loving and kind in return, and how that changed this person's behavior. This troll opened up. Love can have that impact on people. And also, it's hard. And I'm not saying that we have to be loving and kind to every single person who mistreats us or others. But when we have it in us to respond to people who are being hurtful with love, that can do a lot to transform this world. Where can love disrupt a toxic pattern? The second question is, where can love push against systems of oppression and stories of unworthiness? And that's something we've been doing in this congregation, and I'm proud of us for that. I'm really proud of how we have raised a lot of money in gift cards and donated a lot of clothing to the migrants who are joining our community living in a hotel here in Bedford. As you probably know, there are lots of Haitian migrants living in hotels throughout the state because we are a right-to-shelter state for these families. And while we are responding with love and generosity, a lot of people are not. There are white supremacists who are organized to show up at some of these places and try to intimidate our new neighbors. And some of them tell pretty insidious stories of unworthiness. They say things like, well, what about veterans who deserve housing? And how come the veterans aren't getting the housing, but these other people distancing, these other people don't deserve it? And that's why it's so important to choose connection, especially in the face of systemic oppression, especially when other people are organizing to tell us a story about unworthiness. The third question is, who is already in my circle of responsibility? Who is right there in front of me? I'll tell a little story about this one. One morning, one of my housemates came in and she said, our neighbor is asking for something and I can't understand her. Can you try? Our neighbor speaks Portuguese. I do not speak Portuguese, but I do speak Spanish, sort of, medium amount of Spanish. So I was like, well, I'll try. That didn't work. I got Google Translate out. That worked pretty well. Pretty soon I came to understand that our neighbor had had her car broken into and that she was hoping that I could help her with two things. She wanted to ask the across the street neighbors about the surveillance footage from their camera that points out to the street, and she wanted me to call the police. Now, I'm a police abolitionist. I don't ever want to call the police, and also I don't like surveillance culture and I don't like security cameras. But oh well, there I was, she needed help, this is what she wanted to do, so I said, okay. And I did my best to navigate the conversation with the neighbors across the street, who also had limited English and spoke Chinese, so we were really having a time. But, well, you know, Malden, it's the beauty of Malden. So anyway, we struggled through, and she was the person right there in front of me, so I did my best to show up with love, even though I was definitely not the best person for the job. And that's something that we also do here. We show up for one another because we are right here in front of each other, including you virtual people on Zoom. And we do our best to show up for our neighbors of all kinds. The last thing I want to say is, it's very important not to forget that you are in your circle of responsibility, that you are beloved, as Jamie talked about last week, that it's always important to choose loving ourselves as well. Some of us forget that too. And also to remember once more that we will fall short, as Jamie so eloquently reminded us in our reading, that we will fall short and we can begin again in love. Like those birds who found a new way to be together, we can begin again. It's always the right time to forgive ourselves and each other and begin again in love. So let's keep asking those questions together here at First Parish. Let's keep wondering where we can disrupt toxic patterns with love, where we can push back against oppression and stories of unworthiness with love, where we can love those who are right there in front of us. Let's keep choosing connection, even when society makes it easy for us to choose distance. Let's keep living into our promise that we say every Sunday, that love is the spirit of this church. I invite you to join in singing Though I May Speak with Bravest Fire. Please rise in body or in spirit. It's number 34 in your cloth-bound or gray hymnal. May we love one another into being our best selves, and when we fall short, may we rely on that love from this community to pull us back to our better selves. May we love this community and maybe even the whole world into more healing, more wholeness. Let's do it.